So one of my favorite things about doing this show, and really why I started doing it in the first place, is I love talking about all these weird games that nobody's ever heard of. And so far, every game I've talked about has been something from my childhood, but the game I'm going to talk about today is something that I only learned about a few months ago. It was during a trip back to my hometown in California, and we stopped in a little dinky used game shop, and my wife got really excited about a particular SNES game. So here we are today, where we're going to talk about Young Merlin for the Super Nintendo.
Young Merlin was developed by Westwood Studios and published by Virgin Interactive for the SNES in March of 1993. You play as Young Merlin, appropriately enough, although he looks more like young Hercules than a sprightly version of a wizard with a beard powerful enough to challenge ZZ Top. Merlin is on a quest to stop the Shadow King, who, from his underground lair, is commanding his army of meanies to seize control of all that is beautiful and righteous in the land. Merlin finds himself in this land after being swept away while trying to save a maiden from a river, and enlists the Lady of the Lake to put a stop to the Shadow King's reign of terror. The game features an isometric viewpoint and an inventory system similar to the Legend of Zelda series, although the similarities between the two end there. You spend the game collecting items and spells to help you solve puzzles and access new areas. They're all really interesting and result in some really impressive animation. You'll unlock things like the spring, that lets you jump over chasms, the balloon that lets you float up mine shafts, and the comb, which stuns nearby enemies with Merlin's good looks. The game controls great, with Merlin walking fast enough that getting around never feels like a chore, which is a great feature as you'll be backtracking quite a bit. The Y button uses items and support spells, which can be cycled through using the shoulder buttons, and the B button uses offensive spells, which is selected using the A button. Either button can be reassigned in the game's pause menu. The entire package feels like a point-and-click adventure game mixed with Zelda. The game focuses much more on exploration and problem-solving rather than combat, as most enemies can simply be avoided. That is, except for the game's large bosses, which are cleverly designed but are terribly frustrating to deal with. Luckily, the penalty for dying in the game is minimal, simply pushing you back a short ways so you can try again. It's very quick and hardly any inconvenience at all. The bosses can be defeated by learning their simple patterns, but that doesn't mean they're easy. Fighting this giant spider boss, you must cycle between the ice spell that freezes everything on the screen and Merlin's basic attack spell, but they're both bound to the attack button, meaning you'll constantly be shifting your offensive spell back and forth. It's incredibly cumbersome, but luckily the bosses are few and far between enough that it doesn't take away too much from the experience, although the game does pull the old fight all the bosses again at the end of the game trick.
What really first caught my attention about Young Merlin is the game's art style. It doesn't look like a Super Nintendo game. And I'm usually pretty good at being able to tell what console a game is for just by looking at the graphics, and it looks more like an early to mid-90s PC game than something for a console. It's full of lush, vibrant color, and for a game that focuses so much on exploration, it gives you a lot to look at.
The game is incredibly charming, with the gorgeous sprite work able to take a large amount of the credit. The game's fantasy world doesn't seem to be made up of tile sets like in other games, and instead appears to be just one giant piece of art, allowing it to feel very open and varied as you're not seeing things like cliffs built out of smaller images. The sound work might turn some players off, but the music is undeniably great. Frank Klepacki, well known for his work in other Westwood games like the Lion King games, as well as the Command & Conquer series, breathes a lot of life into the game world with his soothing, whimsical melodies, inviting the player to really sink into their chair and get absorbed in what they're playing. The game's voices, and I use the term loosely, are probably going to draw the ire of some, as they could easily be categorized as annoying, but to me, they were part of the game's charm. The way the meanies challenge Merlin to a fight just makes me smile.
What makes Young Merlin so great is just how charming the game is. It's the kind of game where you just want to push everything else aside and focus on some good old-fashioned problem solving. It's the kind of game that you can tell was made just because somebody wanted to make it, rather than something being designed just to make a ton of money. And since the game's credits only list about a dozen people, you can tell that it's a labor of love, rather than something that's a result of focus testing something into a gray paste.
If you love games that leave you to your own devices to figure things out, you're going to get a huge kick out of Young Merlin. Even if you're the kind of person that relies on walkthroughs to get you through a game, there's still so much to enjoy here. Except for the minecart sequences, which were federally mandated to be in every game ever in the early 90s. At the time of this filming, the cart alone goes for between $5 and $10 on eBay, with complete box copies going for around $25. That's really not a very big barrier to entry for a game this unique. That's all for this episode. In order to keep up with what's going on with the Backlog, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, check out our website, and like us on Facebook. If you want to know what I'm up to personally, you can check me out on Twitter as well.
That's not how games go.